Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Township of Puslinch on April 17th, 2019. We'll start with disclosure of community interests. Seeing none. All right. Oops. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Spoulos, that staff be directed to prepare a draft amendment to our... No, that's not the right one. Sorry, folks. There is it. There we go. That's better. There we go. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulos, that Council received the confidential verbal report from Nina Lessick, Deputy Clerk, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, with respect to the 2019 Puslinch Volunteer of the Year Award. B, confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO Clerk, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to Swastika Road judicial review. All in favor? Couple minutes. All right. Moved by Councillor Spoulos, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. A, council meeting April 3rd, 2019. B, closed council meeting April 3rd, 2019. Any questions or comments? Councillor Spoulos.
Are you on business arising or not?
No, we're just...
okay, fair enough.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right. Now, business out of, rising out of the minutes. Anything else, Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, in reference to your mayor's update last meeting, you had included the letter that you had penned and sent to the Minister of Transportation regarding the Morrison bypass. I was wondering, given the provincial budget last week or last Wednesday, do we have an update on the project?
As far as I know, it was not inclusive of the budget, and it's just still on the 5-year plan. That is all I have received, and everybody is just still in limbo, unless anybody else around the table has any information to add. I was speaking with a local resident. They did ask permission to enter the back of their property to do tree removal in the last week or so, so there is still work ongoing. That's the only thing I have.
Okay, I'd like to suggest we move a motion that we ask you to pen a letter to the Minister of Transportation to update us on the status of this project with respect to current activities, the design and construction timing.
Okay. Can I get a seconder for that? So, Councillor Rowe? I'm okay with that, so all in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we're at 7:05. We'll go to our delegates. And the first one is Andrianne, Jen, and Rachel. Come on down. Welcome. So we just asked.
Okay. I pointed that. Okay. All right. There's no laser or anything, right? Okay. All right.
Okay, you can start whenever you like.
All right.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Seeley, council, and staff. Thank you for having us today. I'm going to go over a little bit on our 2018 annual results in our annual report, as well as an update on our permit renewal applications and some work that we've been doing in the community. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit on our Aberfoyle permit. We are regulated via permit to take water. Our current permit, I just wanted to flag, and I believe all of you have seen our permit, but we do have 2 production wells listed on our permit, TW380 and TW211. However, not to exceed a total taking per day of 3.6 million liters per day. Now we're going up for permit renewal, and we're asking for TW211 to be removed as a production well. That well has never been in use. We don't have a pump in it. It's purely a monitoring point for us at this point in time. And the permit renewal application was originally submitted in April of 2016. However, since then, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks came out with some new technical requirements for water bottlers only. And out of those requirements included additional scientific evaluations. So it took us a few years to get through. We're here today to present some of those results. But under the Water Resources Act, our current permit remains in effect until a new decision is made by the ministry. This is a schematic of our Aberfoyle water supply well. Really, it's just to show that it's 102 feet in depth. We take our water from the lower bedrock aquifer. Our well is fully lined and cased to the water producing zone where we're taking water from. We have a robust monitoring program. We monitor at over 80 monitoring locations, both on and off of our property. All of those locations are instrumented with data loggers that are collecting information on an hourly basis. I have a plot here showing our annual water takings. So you could see that through the years, since 2000, it varies year to year. In 2018, our water takings from an annual basis equate to about 50% of what we're allowed to take. The other figure that I have next to that is a hydrograph of our production well, which plots water elevation with time. And really, the basis of this is to identify any sort of long-term trends, declining trends of any sort due to our impact or due to our pumping. And then just to show that through this plot, you're able to see that the aquifer levels are responding to our pumping. So, and that's what you would expect, because the aquifer, or the water elevations need to lower to be able to enter the pump and to be taken out of the ground. But the basis is we want to ensure that our takings are sustainable, that the water levels will bounce back when our pump is turned off. And a lot of the noise that you're seeing here is the pump turning on and off. A little bit on our groundwater monitoring, and again, everything is in our annual reports, which I brought you a copy for the township today, and it's also on our website. But this figure just represents what's happening on one of our closest monitoring points to our production well, and then versus one of our farther monitoring points, MW8, which is titled. And then the associated hydrographs. And this just shows that at MW2, which you would expect, you're closer to the production well, so you're going to really pick up some of the pumping noise that we're doing at our production well. But you're seeing that the response to pumping lessens as you go further up the aquifer system to the overburden, and that's represented by the different colors on the hydrograph. And then on the top hydrograph is our farthest monitoring point, MW8, and you're seeing some fluctuations there, but those are attributed to seasonal variability. A little bit on surface water. We monitor Aberfoyle Creek on our property. It enters and exits throughout our property. We have multiple monitoring locations throughout the creek, but this just is a plot of SW1, which is what's entering our property, and SW2, which is what exits. So you can see that there's a long-term hydrograph of water elevation with time. The red represents SW2, what's leaving, and SW1 is what's entering. Now, we had a technical engagement session last month, and the question came up about the SW2 data. So again, back to the red line here. So we're looking at the trends, a long-term trend, and if you really zoom in to the past few years, you can see on the plot to your left that there seems to be a slight decline, but again, looking at the scale, it's at a very, very small scale. And so we actually took it one step further, and there's an addendum in our annual report on this study. But what's the explanation for it? We looked at our impacts from our pumping that didn't correlate. We looked at straight precipitation data that didn't correlate. And then we took it one step further and looked at infiltration. And so infiltration is what's actually making it into the soil and making it to the surface water itself. Because again, we're looking at surface water levels. And as you can see on the top chart to your right, there's longer periods, we're seeing longer periods of zero infiltration. And if you zoom in even further on the bottom chart, it really correlates well with the trend that we're seeing at SW2. So that's what we've attributed this to. And again, there's more detail in the annual report on this. We also do biological monitoring, so we not only monitor what's under us, but also what's above ground and how our ecosystem is doing, and we want to ensure that we don't have any negative impacts to the surrounding ecosystem as well due to our water taking. We've been doing this for many years. And the communities seem to have remained stable over the years. We'll continue to do that. We monitor different things every year just because the habitats change slower. So we want to make sure we capture everything. So in summary, the water level variations that you're seeing within the lower bedrock are stable. We don't believe that we have caused any long-term declining trends in the aquifer levels. What we're seeing is a response to our pumping, and we want to ensure that our takings are sustainable. The surface water levels fluctuate in response to precipitation and snowmelt events. The water temperature suitability for the fish, the aquatic habitat, are consistent with previous years. And the biological monitoring indicates that there have been no significant changes to the terrestrial and aquatic habitat over the years. Now, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the new scientific evaluations we've done throughout this new permit renewal requirements for water bottlers. And that is work with the City of Guelph groundwater, or the Guelph Aramosa Tier 3 work. There's a regulation that we must work with the municipalities closest municipalities Tier 3. And in Guelph had done a lot of work on that, and so we've been working with the city through their consultants to assess the cumulative impacts from our groundwater takings. The Tier 3 model, as you all are aware, was approved by the Lake Erie Source Protection Region, and we've been working through this for a while. This figure depicts the limits of the Tier 3 model. The limits of the model, it's really a regional model. The Aberfoyle well is south of Guelph, and the closest municipal well is about 7 kilometers. That's the Burke well. So that's the well we were looking at impacts on. Now, I did want to flag that the City of Guelph last year had published a table that really ranked any potential risks or threats to their water supply system. And our Aberfoyle well actually ranked very, very low at the bottom of the list, about 1% of an impact to the closest well, which is the Burke well. One of the things that we were looking at as well throughout this Tier 3 evaluation is looking at the effects of climate change and how things would look in the aquifers. And so the City of Guelph had done this work in 2018, and we used a consistent approach and the consistent climate change scenarios as they did. And really what we're seeing is that the recharge is going to increase in the aquifers in the winter months with climate change. And I think we can all see that right now in our winters. There's a lot more freeze and thaw out happening. There's less of a snowpack, and you're essentially getting more water's infiltrating to the aquifers throughout the winter. So you're going to see more recharge and higher water levels in the winter months. And then the spring, summer, and fall will be about the same. So that was a summary of the climate change work. And finally, I did want to share that some of you may have seen a drill rig drilling some monitoring wells around Aberfoyle recently. That's through our partnership with the University of Guelph G360 group and through the township. The university drilled 3 monitoring wells on township property, and it's really aimed at improving the understanding of our local groundwater flow system. It's a multi-stakeholder project which will not only add information for our monitoring program, but it would also help the township as well as the university research. So there's more to come on that whole project, but it is exciting news, and we're happy to be part of it. And finally, concluding remarks, clearly data just every decision that we make is based on data and fact and information. So we are committed to our monitoring program and to keep that going as best we can. We share all of our information publicly, as I'm here today to do, as well as our recent community info sessions, our office hours that we've held for years, and our First Nation engagement. So we're as transparent as we can be. All of our information is also on our website, and we're always open to feedback on that front. And that is it for today. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'll open it up to council for questions. Councillor Rowe?
Yes, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for your work with others in the community and your continued monitoring, and I think it shows how important this water source is to everybody, not just you. So I think we're on the right track.
Thank you.
Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your presentation. I had the good fortune of being able to attend your recent meeting at the community center. Very well attended, both by the members of the public and your team, which was nice to see that all parts of your business were represented there. I thought that made a good opportunity for the community to ask questions. I was expecting it simply to be on water, but the community came and asked all sorts of questions that I didn't expect to hear. So I was glad you were prepared to answer those kinds of questions, from transportation all the way up to what the company is doing globally. But you mentioned both that night and tonight the Burke Well, which is the closest municipal well in Guelph. And in both of those presentations, you mentioned that Nestle's would be responsible, or the Source Water Protection Committee estimates that Nestle's would be responsible for 1% of the drawdown in the well. And I believe in your report, you said with a 10-meter drawdown in that well in the Burke, 1% equals 0.1 meter, or in my mind, it's 10 centimeters. But in your report, you said that your projections or estimates or calculations you estimate that to be 0.02 or 2 centimeters, which is 5 times less than what was in that source water protection thing. So I'm trying to figure out, how do you come up with that figure having 5 times less of an impact on the closest municipal well compared to what the Source Water Protection Committee came up in their report?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So that's really part of all the work that we've been doing with the Tier 3 and with the City of Guelph. The basis of I guess we've provided the Tier 3 model with all of our site-specific information in their regional groundwater model. We needed to assess our impacts to the closest municipal well, and their model was developed essentially on a regional scale, focusing on their wells. So we had the ability to provide them with all of our information, our pump test data, et cetera, where they were able to really refine our area with the data that we have, because a groundwater model can only improve with the more data you have. So we refined that, and then they recalibrated it to our pump test information and to our water elevations that we've collected over the years. And then essentially our drawdown cone or cone of depression shrunk. Because it was more realistic of what was really happening here. And so the results, rather than the 10 centimeters that was originally obtained, it became 2 centimeters based on our analysis.
Okay.
Or the city's analysis. It was all done through the city and their consultants.
Okay, so then their model then actually produced that number. It isn't something you guys came up with at Nestle's. It's something that the City of Guelph's model then recalibrated came up with.
Yeah. So for clarity, the City of Guelph allowed us to use their model. However, we had to use it. All we did was to provide them information, and their consultants that created the model worked on it.
So they gave you the number back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's going to be in our permit renewal application a separate appendix that's going to be a report from their consultants with all those results
Okay.
in the application itself.
That's interesting. So in increasing the resolution then for this area, it doesn't mean that there might not be a 1% drawdown, but it's not all attributable just to your taking. Then other takings may, because you're not the only water taking between here and that well either.
Right,
Okay, I
right.
get it. That's very helpful, thank you. The other piece that we talked about at the community center, and this wasn't maybe directly related to your annual report, but it does affect the community, was there was a question about the number of trucks that go, and I heard that as the number of tankers, and I was surprised when the answer came back, is that with typically there's 3 trucks a day, and/or in a busy season maybe 5. And I know my experience, well, I shouldn't say my experience, but my wife's experience in the summertime when we're trucking hay on 34 in the peak season, we seem to see tankers quite regularly. So I just wanted to clarify, when they said 5 trucks, do they mean 5 trucks running back and forth, or 1 truck running back and forth 5 times during the day? Because I couldn't make that out at that night.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. So really, what we have is, there's a misconception out there that we do have multiple trucks going back and forth 24/7. In reality, have about 3 tankers that come from Erin to Aberfoyle. So the same truck 3 times. It's really during one shift. And there are other tankers out there, such as there's milk, there's different chemical tankers. So perhaps, that's maybe where the confusion was. But I can tell you that I'm responsible for the Erin source, and I know what goes out of there, out of the location there, and it's about 3 a day.
Okay, so that makes sense too, that if the truck, even if it's 1 truck going back and forth 3 times, you're going to see that almost every hour going one way or the other. All right. You mentioned the March 7th technical meeting, and although this wasn't in your report, it was in Mr. Denhode's follow-up report, that there were some concerns raised at the meeting about the ambient background levels, water levels in the moraine. And I believe Mr. Denhode followed up with that. What was the nature of the concerns that were raised, and did Mr. Denhode's information address those, do you know?
Unfortunately, I haven't spoken to Mr. Denhode since that meeting, but certainly we're open to having that conversation. It's always good to have background data points to look at, to really understand what's happening in the background. I believe in that, and that's certainly something that we could look at.
But you don't remember what the concern was that people raised at the technical meeting? What they were concerned, they were up, down, sideways?
Sure.
We
Well,
didn't have
there's some monitoring points that we kind of say are on the fringe of our monitoring data, or our monitoring network, and sometimes they pick up different things that are not directly from our pumping schemes, but could be from something else around the area. We're in an area that's growing. Everybody has their own production wells, so that's the value of having a monitoring network, because you're able to detect if something is changing, and then it's up to us to really try to drill down and understand what that is.
Okay, well, I guess I could always get that information from Mr. Denhode then. Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Whitta?
Thank you. Good evening, Andriane. I just wanted to start by saying it's very much appreciated that you're here today. As I understand, it's not something that you're required to do or have to do, and you've chosen to come here to present in front of us, which is not always easy, so thank you for doing that. I also, as well as Councillor Balmer, attended the info session this past week at the community center, and also during the election I had the opportunity of touring the facility. And I have to say that there's always a lot of respectful dialogue and willingness to share information, and that's very encouraging to me. It was interesting for me to learn of the ranking of the potential risks on the Guelph Municipal Supply, which you showed on your one slide there. And I was surprised that the ranking showed that individually the Nestle water taking had a very small impact on the water levels of the municipal wells, and that was, as you said, only 1%. And so based on that risk, I would imagine that if Nestle were to stop pumping water tomorrow, the impact would be very small. And for me, that's an important part of the conversation of what is what can be a controversial topic. Having said that, I've heard it being said that the takings from Nestle have no long-term negative trends or decline in the water levels. However, in the report that we have in front of us from Hardin Environmental, there does seem to be some small declines in the graph, as it appears anyway, in some of the groundwater wells monitoring station, as well as the surface water, which I think you touched on just now. But Mr. Denhoed explains that those are not necessarily, he can't necessarily connect those with the pumping at Nestle, but that the reason for that should be investigated. And I know that maybe that's not something that you can answer right here and now, but I'm wondering if you might be aware of why that would be.
Does it say which monitoring point?
It shows. So I am
The
not an expert in
MW10?
reading these hydrographs, but
Okay.
I think this one shows MW10C.
Yep. So that's kind of one of those locations that's very farther away from our production well. I will point out that on that hydrograph there, the past 3 years have been stable. 3 or 4 years are stable. There's been a bit of a change there in 1 year to the next, and that again is something that we don't feel is attributed to our pumping. We don't exactly know what happened there. We are certainly looking into it, but again, it's in an area that there's other wells around, so it's hard to point exactly what is happening. We are in a bedrock system. It's very complicated, but that's the value of having this information, is to try to figure out what is happening. And again, I will point, the scale is the scale is not that large either of the change, but it is something that we have looked at, yeah.
Okay. So for argument's sake, to date, the data suggests that there have been no, or at least very little, impact long-term on the water sustainability. But I'm wondering, does Nestle have a strategy or a contingency, I guess, if that trend were to ever to start showing differently?
Yeah, I think we've been first of all, we're regulated heavily by the government. If we were seeing some negative impacts, it's our responsibility to notify the government, but also they review our data very frequently. If we were to see unacceptable negative declining trends due to our operation, this is something we've always said, that the community water supply comes first. We would have to alter our operation or do things differently. We've been collecting information for almost 20 years. We have a very long-term data set, and some of the fluctuations in the hydrograph of our production well that you're seeing is based on from our pumping. We have correlated all of our data there, and it's an influence of our pumping. The piece that I do want to stress is that it doesn't mean that the aquifer is not sustainable. The water elevations will change if we pump more or pump less, but it needs to maintain a stable trend over the years, and I believe that's what we're seeing.
Okay. One thing that wasn't mentioned at all in the report was water quality, and I'm wondering, is that something that also gets monitored? And if so, have you noticed any changes in the quality of water over the years? Or
Thank you for the question. Quality, we're a spring water company, so quality is just as important as quantity, as the sustainability of the resource. We can't change the chemistry of the water, so we want to make sure it's tested hourly, I think, in our factory. I take water quality samples as well, right at the source. We have a long-term history of the water quality. It's very stable. We want to make sure it stays that way, and I think that's one of the values that we bring to the community, because we're doing so much testing, and we want to make sure that that we can identify future risks, if there are some, to the water quality. We're really lucky here in Puss Lynch. We have great water, and we want to keep it that way.
Okay. And my last question is the Nestle well, as you showed us on the slide, it's encased in stainless steel, but I believe that there's other private wells in and around your well and throughout the township as a whole that are not encased. And I'm just trying to understand, does that cause risk for your water, your well? Does it cause risk for groundwater in general? Is that something that we should be looking at?
The way we construct our wells is to be most protective of the aquifer as possible, and so we fully line or case all of our monitoring wells and our production wells. Certainly, we'd love everybody to do that. However, it's not a we don't create the regulations. The ministry does, and the current regulation is to case till you hit the top of rock, and then then it's essentially an open hole. Now, as far as if that causes any impacts, we don't know because we don't have the data to show that. We're certainly open to it, but right now we just don't have the information to say anything, to speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spools?
Yes, thank you for coming, being on the hot seat again.
My favorite.
A couple of things. The first one relates to the level 1 announcement by the Grand River Low Water Response Team. You cite in here that you do not restrict by 10% your daily takings, but you're saying that since you're not taking the maximum amount, you automatically comply with that request. And I guess I have a real concern with that, because whenever there's a level 1, you see all these signs in Guelph that asking people to, this is a water level, it's whatever the color code is, or asking them to restrict their current taking, not what their maximum permitted. Like, I'm sure Guelph is in the same boat as you are. They have a permit to take water, and I'm sure they take less than what their permit says, and yet they put in these restrictions. So I'm wondering, how can you justify saying that we're taking 80% of the permitted daily take, and we don't have to worry about the fact that there's a level 1 water response?
Well, thank you for the question. I don't think we quite say it that way, and I don't think that's how it's possibly worded in our report. But I will, number one, say that the City of Guelph drought low-level designations are due to infrastructure. They simply don't have the infrastructure to allow everybody to water their lawns at the same time. So it's related to infrastructure, not water quantity. However, for us, we're part of the low water response team, and we have always said, and I believe I mentioned it last year as well, that the way our commitment is to the voluntary level 1 or level 2 restrictions is we look at it on a monthly basis. We commit to not taking more than 80 or 90% of our allowed taking on a monthly basis. It's very difficult for us to manage that on a daily basis. Now, I also want to add that the level 1s and level 2 declarations are based on precipitation and surface water levels, and we take water from the deeper system, so those two things are not directly connected. And then the other piece is, so that's on a voluntary basis for all permittees. Now, the regulations are changing for water bottlers only, which accounts for 0.01% of all the water takers in the province, and that's about 12 permits out of 5,500. And we are going to be mandatorily mandated to reduce our takings by 10, 20, or 30% from a daily average of a past 90 days. So from our daily average, we need to reduce by 10, 20, 30. That is part of the new requirements, only for spring water bottlers. And so I think from a company perspective, we like to look at things holistically. We're not the largest water user, and we're not the only water user. And if we really wanted to make an impact in the province, we should look at all water users and looking at the same regulations. Because right now, the way it's going to work is we're going to be abiding by this, but our neighbors will not.
Okay, apart from that, like I'm quoting here, you're saying Nestle's water's taking were below 80% of the permitted daily amount during the low water condition. Like, the way I read that sentence is that you're taking your annual permitted amount and you're saying, well, we're within that. So that's my opinion, but I don't want to debate it with you anymore. The second, last issue I want to bring up is what Councilor Gorda talked about is the OW10C-09 well. And respect to Hardin's comment that trying to separate the influence on the water levels there, whether it's you or somebody else. And you mentioned in your response to Councilor Gorda that you are undertaking such an analysis. Can you let us know what sort of analysis and what sort of timeframe you're looking at?
Well, I meant, I'm sorry if I misspoke, but we are, I mean, those are, the hydrographs help us look at things like different trends. Now, you're seeing the past 3 or 4 years were stable. There was a slight jump in one of the years. I don't have the hydrograph in front of me, but we can't explain exactly where that jump came from. And, you know, we're looking at that, but I don't have that answer. And I think continuing to monitor those points on an hourly basis will help us identify if there's something else that happens. But there's other water users and there's new things happening. I don't know what all the neighbors are doing. I don't know what their pumping rates are, the capacities. That's private information, but it's certainly something that helps us identify if there is an ongoing issue.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I truly appreciate the transparency and coming before council. I've been in your seat and I understand it's a little stressful situation, but I do also appreciate, you know, the community support from Nestle. I was also surprised by the amount of monitoring that is required, and I think it's important. And I'm glad that you as a company are on top of it. And we'll hopefully, if we see anything this outskirt well, obviously through council here is a concern. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you have any, you know, plans for more monitoring, but from what I'm understanding from you is that you're just going to continue the status quo. And so in that graph, what would be the drop from that, call it 1 year that was high? Do we have that available, that graph? Maybe you could provide that to me.
Okay.
So are we talking meters or are we talking centimeters? Are we talking millimeters? What page is it on?
I think we're talking 50 centimeters.
50 centimeters? Okay. So, yeah, going forward, I mean, I don't know if you have desire to look into that issue more so or not, but I think this council would like to possibly see some action on that. But again, thank you for your presentation. And
no problem. I mean, I think back to Councillor Balmer's comment about maybe having some more background points instrumented as well would be helpful to look at that, to see if that's just to help us identify what it could be related to.
okay, thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Sepulveda, seconded by Councillor Gorda. The council receives a presentation by Nestle Waters Canada with respect to the 2018 annual monitoring report. All in favor? Carried. All right, we'll invite our next delegation down, DFA Infrastructure for Asset Management, Environmental Management. Today. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And I will just remind you that just try to speak into the microphone if each one of you is addressed. And the floor is yours, and you can give one.
Thank you. We're back to you again in regard to Regulation 588-17. We have prepared a relatively short presentation. Our guideline was about 15 minutes, so we'll try to adhere to that. I'm going to very briefly review again Ontario 58817, in part because there may be new people in the back, that aren't necessarily aware of it. I want to talk about public consultation, and we will also talk about the financial plan, put that before you. We did an overview of Regulation 58817, primarily to illustrate that the strategic asset management policy, of which you have a copy of tonight, should be completed by July 1st, 2019. And there's a series of steps up to the completion of Phase 3 of 58817, which is in July of 2024. But what is asset management? Again, it's a long-term financial planning tool that brings together asset management and the budgeting process. And as I just indicated, most importantly, what we need to move forward on is the actual policy, and you have the policy before you this evening. But the policy is a strategic asset management policy that formalizes the municipality's commitment to asset management and aligns the asset management actions with strategic goals and objectives of council. The policy supports the municipality in focusing its infrastructure efforts on managing risk and addresses priorities in terms of meeting short and long-term needs. I also want to point out that certainly, as I indicated, that's the number one priority in terms of going forward. We did present our asset management plan, and as you may or may not recall, I'm sure you do, but we did meet on February the 5th in regard to these council chambers. The sign-in sheets indicated that there was 7 individuals in attendance, and we subsequently received 2 emails. I wanted to review with you the comments from the public, and this was our staff writing down, obviously, what we perceived to be the issues. But there was both verbal and written concerns. And obviously, an important one was the need from the public to ensure that there's a process that would allow the surface treatment of certain gravel roads, especially when they are close to residential homes. And we responded to those, and we'll see that in subsequent slides if you want us to review those tonight. There was also some concern in regard to Old Morrison Park, which really wasn't our area insofar as developing responses, in that it was our understanding from staff that that had been dealt with through direct council involvement. There was also some concern in regard to emails, and I'm being a bit repetitive, but there was the request for service level policies for gravel roads, feeling that there was a lack of data in regard to gravel roads, and why we had changed the condition of roads to poor, and we can certainly speak to that tonight if you so wish. There was an opinion expressed that the municipality, the township, should not be borrowing money, and also a request that there be a review of staffing levels of the fire department and the township as a whole. So we responded in our report to the public, and also in a written letter, that we did develop what we perceived to be a recommended service level for gravel roads, and we wanted to point out that in our response that we didn't consider the spatial significance of gravel roads as they relate to proximity to homes. We did identify in the asset registry that Old Morrison Park had assets that were in poor condition. There was also the question in regard to methodologies used in regard to the condition of buildings, and we indicated that the condition of buildings had been extracted from a recent building condition assessment, and that assessment did not use a condition index in order to assess a condition. We also indicated that in some instances we undertook a visual inspection as part of our team in that there just wasn't complex data available. So we did a visual inspection. Not that we're structural engineers, we're not, I want to say that, but with staff, we identified where there was obvious conditions for improvement. And we also indicated that the need to upgrade a gravel road was developed through reviews of reports, staff input, a survey of neighboring municipalities, especially within the county of Wellington, and the minimum maintenance standards as set out in Ontario Regulation 23902. We did rely heavily on reports, a few reports that were sourced out of the United States, primarily in areas where there was significant changing weather conditions. And we also want, in terms of response, that the asset class level of service policies were developed using sources for relevant information from primarily provincial policies, internal expert opinions, our own opinions, and the recommendations from staff. I could keep going, but to stay within our time frame, we did provide 4 other responses, and I don't want to repeat them, but some of these are associated with gravel roads and the condition of roads and the level of service policies. And we just indicated that it wasn't part of our study to do staffing reviews. So we did update the 10-year capital plan, which is before you, and we undertook a review of the impact of that capital plan on the period of time from 2019 through to 2028. And I'm going to ask John to take over and speak to the financial aspects of the report.
Thank you, Wayne. You've probably seen these slides before. They've been modified slightly. But again, regulation requires that a municipality prepare a 10-year financial plan in regards to the proposed levels of service, and that is the capital plan prepared by UEM. We prepared 3 financial strategies. Each strategy was based on pay-as-you-go and debt financing, with consideration given to reserves levels and a municipal debt capacity. The 3 options were based on either a 1%, 2%, or 3% tax impact on a typical single-family detached dwelling. We incorporated financial policy considerations in regards to the reserve levels, funding targets, and debt capacity. Now, the 3 financial policy considerations, again, the target funding levels, we strived in each of the funding options to achieve a asset management plan funding level equivalent to 2% of the asset values under consideration. We looked at developing or trying to achieve a reserve balance, which was equivalent to really 1 year or 2 years worth of the average capital plan, and looking at limiting debt servicing at 10% of own source revenues. Now, that's typical of municipalities. Guidelines, provincial guidelines limit municipalities to 25% debt servicing, or 25% of own source revenue going towards servicing long-term debt. I think you guys are at 0, if I understand. Okay, which, but for now, no. I know debt is a 4-letter word, but, so what we have here, we have 2 charts. One that shows your, each of the 3 options and the asset management plan funding levels. You can see that option 3, which is the 3% option, gets you pretty quickly to that funding target level. Now, when I say 3%, you're looking at 3% in the first year, and I think you pretty much get there. The 2% option, you achieve that in 2024. With the 1% option, you don't quite get there at all over the 10-year forecast period. What that pretty much says is that it's somewhat unsustainable. You're not going to get to your level of target funding. Now, what that actually does in the next slide, you'll see with regards to debt, you have a capital program that you need to fund. If you don't have money being raised in a given year or in the bank, in the reserve, you're going to have to borrow to undertake that capital program. And each of the options, you do require the use of debt to underwrite the capital program because there's insufficient funds being provided annually and or in the bank. But option 3, which is a 3% option, at the end of the 10-year period, you're only looking at, I'll say a limited amount of debt, but your debt servicing is equivalent to half of what the target, your policy target is, which is 10% of own source revenue. In this case, you're at 5%. But if you look at option 1, you're at, 84% of the target level, which is 8.4% of your own source revenue is going towards servicing debt that was required to underwrite the capital program over the previous 10 years. So the recommendations that we're making is that you go with the 3% funding option, which gets you to the sustainable level of funding sooner. That achieves, actually, it's 2022, so a couple of years down the road, you're not looking at 3%. I think you're actually under 1%. Funding impact. Once you get to that target funding level, you're at the least amount of debt required to underwrite the capital program. And really what it does, which is the most important thing, is it best positions the municipality come 2028, because what this capital plan doesn't show is what your needs are post 2028.
So that is our presentation, and obviously, we're here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. And I understand this is a living document, and I think you've done great work, but a lot of things can change. Every time we pave a gravel road, it's going to change these numbers. So, but we have to start somewhere and have a plan. So I appreciate your work. Councillor Roth?
Thank you, I have no questions.
Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Good to see you both again. I don't think I have any questions. We've been back and forth on this several times, but I think I've come to understand through the process that we are now at the end of the beginning, as they say. And as the mayor says, it's a living document. It's now it'll be up to ourselves and our staff to make this our document and make the changes we want. And I think I appreciate the financial analysis that you've done, because I think the greatest gift we can give future councils and future residents is to achieve that target as soon as reasonably possible. So thank you very much for a map on how to do that.
Councillor Bitta?
Thank you. I have no questions.
I just have a quick question on the debt capacity comparison. When you look at your slide 16, option 3, you're saying in 2027 we sort of stabilize the debt. What happens after that? Are you saying that debt 400,000 stays in perpetuity?
No. Microphone, please. Sorry. No, any debt, and I think we've assumed that the debt that's being issued has a term of 10 years. So what happens is, at the end of 10 years, so let's say in year 1 you issue debt, at the end of 10 years that debt has been fully serviced. it falls off, but in year 2, any debt, it's going to fall off in year 11.
Okay.
So it's being serviced, but post-2028, you're at a sustainable funding level. Pretty much what you're doing is you're still going to have to service the debt that was issued.
I'm with you.
But
Yeah, I'm with you, and then eventually we'll drop off.
that's right.
Yeah, okay, great, that's all I have.
Okay, I have no questions, but again, thank you for your presentation. I just have one comment that with the public information meeting, when residents come forward, and I don't want it to be lost on this council that it's not an asset abandonment plan, it's an asset management, and if they come forward and they have a concern, I understand that it's not your process to put it back into the plan, but I found that, I struggled with that a little bit because their intention at the public information meeting is that they would be heard and then possibly into the plan. So I think we have a responsibility in that, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Skoulas, that council receives a presentation by DFA Infrastructure International, Inc. and Urban and Environmental Management with respect to financial 2019-0112 Asset Management Plan, final. All in favor? Carried. All right, back to the front page. Okay, so now we're on to public meetings. Do we have a motion to read for that?
No, just
Okay.
now.
We have the public meeting, Portsmouth Community Center Park Master Plan, Phase 1 and Phase 2. Note, this public information meeting will be held on Thursday, May 22nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the Portsmouth Community Center, 23 Brock Road South. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Communications. Let me just pull them up. Okay, first one is the Nestle Waters Canada Aberfoyle site report. Any questions or comments?
I just had some questions of Hardin Environmental, but I assume that you passed the questions on, or?
And Hardin's here.
Okay,
You want to bring,
That's up to council, yeah.
okay, we can invite Hardin Environmental down. If council's okay with that? Well,
All of our friends from Nestle left when I left originally. I turned around and came back.
I'll start with Councillor Roth. Okay, we're just going to start, just to keep conformity, I'll just, Councillor Roth, do you have any questions for Hardin Environmental? Councillor Palmer?
Just the one that I had asked Nestle's about the March 7th technical meeting. Apparently some concerns were raised about water levels in the moraine, ambient levels in the moraine. What was the nature of those concerns, and did the data you provide satisfy those concerns, do you know?
It was a question in regards to the headwater areas, is how it was stated in the meeting. I believe it was somebody from Wellington Water Watchers that said, yeah, we appreciate all the data that's gathered in close to Aberfoyle, but what about the headwater areas was the question. And so, obviously Nestle Waters does a very detailed job within a kilometer or maybe even 2. But the Puslin Monitoring Network goes well beyond that, and I was able to provide that data and to show that indeed that in the headwater areas, the Galt Moraine and the Paris Moraine, that there isn't any kind of declining trend in the marine water levels.
And are those levels in the moraine monitoring the production zone or different, the same aquifer or different, or what's the?
Entirely different. So these are water levels that are in the overburden above all of this system. All our monitors are fairly shallow, so they just monitor basically recharge that is occurring, and so what we're seeing is that over the last 25 years we are not seeing any decline or declining trend in water levels on the moraines.
So that would then lend credibility then to the suggestion that their deep taking is not having an effect generally on the surface levels then, on the levels on the shallow aquifer.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councillor Goyda?
The only question I had is, during Andréan's presentation, she touched on that declining SW2 monitoring well, and had explained that they had correlated it with infiltration. And I guess my question to you is, does that make sense, and are you satisfied with that answer?
Yeah, I would have to see a more fulsome,
Okay.
The response to that. It doesn't quite make sense because the surface water 1 station, which is up gradient, doesn't show the same trend. And so, and the surface water 2 station down gradient does show that trend. And so I just asked myself, well, if it's an infiltration issue, then we should be seeing it at both ends, but we're not. We're seeing it at one. We have seen this, a similar issue in the Mill Creek Aggregates report, where one monitor shows something a little anomalous like that. And I'm not sure if it's, I'm not attributing it to their taking. There may be a more simple answer, like there's scour effect at that particular monitor. But, you know, I don't like to see a declining trend in either the aquifer or their surface water. And Andriane even mentioned a couple times that that's what they're trying to, you know, they're looking for themselves, is that things are stable and understandable. But when you see, you know, over year, a bit of a decline, then that is worthy of questioning and getting an answer on.
Okay,
So I look forward to seeing that analysis that they've done and see if that makes some sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm concerned about the overall decline, even though they say it's 12 millimeters a year, but, you know, that adds up. Couple questions. First of all, do you agree with the decommissioning of the fire flow valve as presented in their analysis? They're saying they're going to replace that with the TW2-11.
-11, right. Yeah, I would be fine with that. That well has been there for a long time and is no longer necessary. It was there actually to fight the fires, I guess, or they would use that to fill up one of their firefighting ponds or something. But yeah, I understand that it's no longer necessary, and I'm all for decommissioning wells that are not needed.
In item 2 report, you talk about the statement, the rapid recovery is mainly due to the fact that the aquifer is depressurized, not dewatered. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that.
Yeah, I know. It's a funny concept, but the fact of the matter is that the aquifer is always full of water. At no time do they actually drop the water level in this rock body below the top of the rock, and so it always has water in it.
Okay.
It's just under less pressure, and it's it is a hard concept to think about, and I don't have a good analogy, unfortunately. But the bottom line is that the water from the moraines in the high areas infiltrates in higher grounds and gets trapped in this Gasport aquifer where they take the water from, and it's actually pushing up. It's trying to get out of this aquifer, and so the water level in the aquifer is way above the top of the rock. And so when they turn on their pump, they drop that water level down, but they never actually dewater. There's no empty pores or empty fractures in the aquifer at all. It's just a matter of lowering the amount of pressure that's trying to get out.
And the last statement I got is, this goes to that OW10C-09, which Councillor Goya asked Nestle's about, and I asked about. And you recommended more analysis be conducted that separates the pumping influence on water levels to determine if the apparent decline can be related to pumping from the TW30. Is there an easy way of doing that, or is that something that's very hard and cumbersome?
Well, the fact that even this year was, you know, they had an anomalous event where they decreased their pumping significantly, like 20 or 30% in the latter part of the year, and that particular monitor did not respond to that, and so that particular monitor does not respond to the daily fluctuations or even the seasonal fluctuations that Nestle, you know, when they pump their well more in the summer, that monitor doesn't respond to that. But it is doing something a little bit different, and it seems to have a year, you know, Andriane said it was like 3 years it's been stable, and then 2 years before that it was declining. And I should look at that maybe a little bit in more detail, but when you look at the graph, and as I stated in the open on the meeting on the 7th, is that I haven't done the statistics on it, and just there looks like there's a trend, and those trends and the same as Andreanne expressed concerns about are concerning. You know, a lowering trend in an area where you've got a lot of production is a concern. So there may be other reasons for it. There may be an area of less permeability, and it responds slower to the whole taking. And, you know, the water levels are lower in the Aberfoyle area, and on the fringe there, it's just been taking a little bit longer to respond to the taking. So you know,
You're saying it's awfully hard to try to.
it is hard to do it.
Okay, that's all
Yeah.
the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about the Aberfoyle Creek monitoring. Have you taken into consideration the human influence on that creek? And I'll tell you why. Years ago, long before my political aspirations, I was driving by and it was dry, completely dry. So I called the GRCA because you see the little Mill Creek sign. This is the headwaters of Mill Creek. I called them. I thought that a beaver had blocked the creek or something. Turns out that an individual is supposed to pull the boards out behind Aberfoyle Mill, and that sets the water level. So I'm not sure if there's a human influence in this as well, which makes it kind of difficult to monitor. So is the monitoring higher water level when it enters the property, or is it the other way? Is it lower at the headwaters of the Nestle property and when it leaves?
No, it's the water levels are higher on the Mill Pond side,
Yeah.
and as it crosses Brock Road, it's high. The water levels are higher, and then they decrease as they go across the property.
So I'm wondering, you know, it's something to take into consideration. Who's monitoring those boards at that? You see the waterfall?
Sure, yeah.
I think the boards are right behind that, and that really
Right.
dictates the flow over the waterfall. And I remember specifically one year they forgot to take the boards out, and it went dry.
Wow. I don't know
So-
what year. Yeah, I don't know what year that was because they have been monitoring that
It
stream
would
for
be
quite a while.
after 2008. I would have been returning home from my
Okay.
day job.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's a big window.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Right. Well, I mean, I made
the
the phone call.
Aberfoyle-
That's the only reason why it sticks out in my mind, right? But
The-
anyway, so that was just my one point. Is I'm just wondering if we. And the other aspect is, do we look at all of the water takers when these say this? I know there is an aggregate at that one well that we've brought up concerns with here, but there could be on the outer fringe on, say, the western boundary, and it starts, you know, fluctuating in the future. Are we looking at all of the water takers when we're trying to figure this out, or are we just pin it on on Nestle? I mean, I see these water taking permits from the aggregate industry.
They're huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're huge, and I don't know if we even have the ability to take them into consideration.
Yeah, so Chris Neville, who represents Nestle, asked that same question this week. He says, do we get monitoring reports for Dufferin or CBM, their main pit? And we don't. We have no idea what's going on with water levels that close to Nestle's. So Nestle's, we do get an annual report. We get an annual report from Aberfoyle Estates, so nearby. And we get annual reports from basically all the gravel pits on the south side of Concession 2. So we get, you know, annual, and so we are able to look at water levels there. But close in to the Nestle Waters, no, we get very little data other than what we get from Nestle Waters.
In your opinion, would they be willing to provide that information, or?
I don't think they collect it.
Okay.
They're not required to under their license, and their permit to take water doesn't require it either.
All right, thank you. All right, so that was the hard environmental report. And you have further ones down, I believe. So maybe I'll just ask you to stay there for.
Yeah, I'll just wait a minute. Yeah.
So we have the CBM Puslinch Pit Monitoring Report. Any questions or comments from council? No? And then another one, here's the one from Hard Environmental, their response from, any questions or comments on that? The next one is the GHD report. Any questions or comments?
This is the Aberfoyle Pit 2.
Moved it 1 second. Yes, Aberfoyle Pit number 2.
Yes, I have a comment on there. The precipitation levels are inconsistent. The annual precipitation levels are inconsistent. I think our CEO's done a good job of asking all the other pits to synchronize their water precipitation data. This particular one is still out of whack. They're up by, forgot what the distance is, but it seems to be quite a bit of variance on annual basis.
Okay, that's for a comment. Is there any resolve for that?
Well, I think we just ask our CEO to reinforce the letter she sent out.
Okay, can I get a seconder for that? Counselor Goida, any questions or comments? Counselor Rowe?
No.
Counselor Ballmer?
This is just asking staff to,
Well, asking staff to send a reminder letter to synchronize their their precipitation data. All the previous ones, except for this one, they all have the same precipitation data. They all agreed to, let's agree on the same precipitation data.
well, we could ask, I guess, it's just, this report is done for the Ministry of Natural Resources, not for our benefit.
But they agreed to do it
Yeah.
for us as well.
It doesn't hurt to ask, I guess.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
That's all I have.
Okay, carried. All right, and then there's the Hardin Environmental Report on Aberfoyle Pit 2. Any questions for Counselor Ballmer?
This is the Honidle Pit, when we've got some water quality monitoring associated with this for several years now. We've been watching the chloride levels. I think you even commented in your report. Are we doing any of the water, I think Councillor Goida asked about water quality earlier. Are we doing any other water quality testing to see if we're getting a similar trend elsewhere in the township associated with the roads?
We actually take and unfortunately I don't have that data in front of me, but we do have a monitoring well within 10 meters of County Road 34, right near the halfway between the Brock Road and Victoria. So right in that area, and we do take water samples, say, every third year there. So we would have had maybe 10 or 15 years of data there. I could take a look at the chloride. I probably have seen it, and it's not alarming, but I have not done a trend analysis on it to see if it's increasing or not.
Okay. But what, we have other monitoring wells along roadsides too, do we not, though? Do we do the same quality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do on a similar basis. So
So maybe the next
we
time.
could take a look, and it would be just a matter. We have it all graphed up. It just a matter of taking a look, and I will, I'll just send an email maybe to Karen
Perfect.
in that regard.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Next one is the, how do you pronounce that? Neubauer Pit Annual Report. Any questions or comments? No. And then Mr. Denhold's report on that one. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, you're almost done. Capital Paving Report. Any questions or comments? No. Seeing none. Okay. And then, last but not least, the report for that one. Any questions or comments? No. Thank you.
All right.
All right, on to intergovernmental affairs. We have the Ontario Energy Board supplemental notice. Any questions or comments on that one? No. Okay. And the natural gas consumption, looks like for the township. Any questions or comments? No. Very good. Here's a notification to take water permit. We're on 124. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ballmer?
The only question I had, are we good, is that of concern? We usually have Stan look at these things or not? It's outside, but it's right adjacent to.
Maybe Madam CEO can.
I haven't sent that to Stan because I haven't had a request from council to do
Okay.
so.
Historically, have we, anything on our borders? Have we?
Only on council's request. I'm not aware of us doing it on this particular case, but
I don't have any outstanding concerns regarding it. But I didn't know what the standing protocol was.
I'm sure the city of Guelph will
Yes.
provide their comments, as will Guelph Hermosa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Then we have the Upper Grand District School Board development charges. Change. Any questions or comments? No? All right, and then we have the correspondence from the Solicitor General. Any questions or comments? I think that's it for IG. Yeah. So we have a motion for IG. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spillis, that the intergovernmental affairs correspondence items listed on the council agenda for the April 17th, 2019 council meeting be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. What's next? Reports. All right. This one. Okay. Moved by Counselor Spoulos, seconded by Counselor Goyda, that report finance 2019-021 regarding the 2018 lease financing agreement summary report be received, and that council accepts the treasurer's statement that all lease financing agreements are non-material and have been made in accordance with the township's lease financing agreement policy as outlined in Schedule B to report finance 2019-021. Any questions or comments? No? All in favor? Carried. Moved by Counselor Goyda, seconded by Counselor Spoulos, that report finance 2019-12 asset management plan final prepared by Urban and Environmental Management, Inc. and DFA Infrastructure International in compliance with Ontario Regulation 588-17 be received. And Madame CEO would like to speak to us.
Yes, members of council, you may have noticed that the recommendation or the motion on the floor just requests you to receive the information tonight. Staff would just appreciate an opportunity just to have one final run-through of the document just to correct any tweaks from a wording point of view just before you adopt it as the program and policy. And then bearing in mind, as everyone has said and spoken to earlier, it is a living document. And as we move forward with some of our studies, we'll be able to make updates as necessary. And you may recall also at the last meeting when this was before you, we were looking at moving the timeline out a year because we weren't able to incorporate the percentage increases to be considered into this year's budget. We did, as from staff's perspective, just maintain what we are at because as we move forward, staff feel that we can handle that information in terms of presenting it to you once we have software implemented and the data into the software system and bring that information forward at a later date during your budget discussions. Okay.
All right, any questions or comments? Counselor Roth?
Nope.
Counselor Bulmer?
Makes sense.
No, fine.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right, now we have the, yep, that's as well. Now we're on to, all right, move to Counselor Spoulos, seconded by Counselor Goyda, that report ADM 2019-017 regarding provincial modernization grant be received and following approval by all member municipal councils, the county chief administrative officer, and member municipal chief administrative officer engage a consultant for the preparation of an efficiencies review as outlined in report ADM 2019-017, and that the chief administrative officers report on the progress made to their respective councils, and that the county of Wellington act as a treasurer for the municipal services review project, that the township transfer $25,000 of the provincial modernization grants funds to the county of Wellington for the efficiencies review project, and that the township set aside the remaining funds of the provincial modernization grant funds in the operating carry forward discretionary reserve for costs associated with the implementation of the approved efficiencies review recommendation. And Madame CEO would like to speak.
Yes, and again, council, you may have noticed that this is a little different than the recommendation that was in the report. I do want to let council know that the county considered this report at its committee meeting on Tuesday. Thus, the reason for the changes that are being on, or that are on the floor this evening. So at the county committee meeting, it was determined that $175,000 would be put in from the county, and that they were requesting that the local municipalities contribute $25,000 each to what is being called an efficiency review. And the intent then is that the RFP will be developed by county staff with the local input from the respective CAOs, and that will be returned to the AF and HR committee at its May meeting. And in discussions with the CAOs in terms of who I was able to reach before the meeting today, a majority of them will be setting aside the remaining funds for any implementation costs that may be associated to implement the recommendations that come forward as a part of this review.
Okay. Counselor Roth.
Okay. Well, I think this is a step in the right direction. I think we have a great opportunity here to share services, and I think the CAOs are the right people to put that in place with the consultants. So I think this is a good plan. I think it may be a little aggressive time-wise, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm all in favor of this.
Counselor Bulmer?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I was following along my agenda. I wasn't aware that could you reread the motion because I had in my mind what was in the report. So maybe you could highlight, maybe Madam CAO could highlight the changes between the report and the motion.
Would you prefer me reread it or just
Or
Madam
maybe the
CEO
Madam
just
CAO
highlight?
could highlight the change in the number, the breakdown there, because
Yeah, the fundamental changes are the amounts to be contributed. So the county is contributing $175,000. Now, that wasn't noted in the actual recommendation for our share, but we
in the
were
report.
initially, yeah, it is in the report. The difference from the local contribution goes from $100,000 to $25,000, and that's for the purposes of the study. However, I believe, like, it was understood that when we were having these discussions, that any surplus funding that wasn't required for the actual study, but that we contributed towards the study, would be set aside for the purposes of implementation.
Right.
So this is just doing it a little differently in terms of we're setting aside a certain amount for the study, and then we're committing to putting the rest in reserve until we deal with the implementation costs with respect to the recommendations. And the naming of the study is different. Instead of a shared services, it's being called an efficiencies services study.
and then I seem to recall in the report and in the other motion, there was saying $270,000 to go towards asset management.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Bulmer. I actually tore that page off. So that was then when we weren't setting aside the entire amount for any implementation costs. But what has happened since then is that the treasurers have actually met, and they are now working towards how we could purchase the same software for asset management software, and some municipalities have already proceeded with the hiring of an asset management support person. So the treasurers are going to meet further to discuss how we can proceed moving forward with utilizing the same system, and hoping that we realize obviously cost savings in that regard, because we're going out as a bigger body, if I can say that, and also utilizing staff as we move through this study and looking at how we could share staff in that regard. So we've taken that off of the recommendation at this given point in time, but do anticipate reporting back at a later time with respect to how we're making out in terms of acquiring that software and how we'll fund it, and also for the support in order to get the information into the system.
So just to clarify then, so although it's no longer mentioned in the motion, it still remains as undedicated funds that could be used for that in the future?
Yes.
Perfect, got it. Because I didn't hear it mentioned in the motion.
Yes.
So then, the change in the name is going to be, you said the,
Efficiencies.
right, so I can't recall, maybe Mr. Creed can refresh my memory. The city of Guelph went through one of these. Were you with the city of Guelph when they went through one of these exercises? The efficiency exercise?
I can't recall.
It was, I recall it was a process. So I preferred the other name, I think, but I appreciate the direction we're moving. I agree with Councillor Roth that I think there are opportunities. We are a very small municipality, and we have a lot of big responsibilities that if we can share them. I like the idea of, especially with the asset management, going joint with other municipalities. I think that could work out well for us. So I appreciate the work that's been done to date, and I really appreciate the fact that the county has included joint council meetings so that we can all hear each other's concerns. I think it's very important that we recognize that we all represent a part of the whole. And if we get together, we can hear that where we have commonalities and maybe work on where we have differences. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
I will just point out that Councilor Bulmer has been removed from the recommendation or the resolution at this given point in time, just because we want to work on the RFP and take into consideration all the different possibilities in terms of informing our councils and having the council involvement. But we will be reporting them back on how that all will roll out.
Oh, so that's no longer part of the process that we're
Oh, I'm not saying it won't be part of the process. We just want to look at it more holistically in terms of what it will all involve.
I thought it was good. I'm hoping it
Yes.
returns because
I will,
would support that.
I will indicate that there is support for that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Goida?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm missing something, but it was originally going to be that the county was contributing $725,000 and each municipality was contributing $100,000 for a total of $1.4 million. And so now it's already, is the cost of this study less than what, Like, why did the numbers go down?
The numbers went down because I think they were being more specific, it could have been probably clearer in just saying that these costs were going to be the costs associated with doing the study, and then separating the costs out with respect to implementation. So that's more clearly defined right now. And of course, as we move forward, if there's a need to perhaps dedicate more funding to the actual study, then we will do so. But if then the remaining funds will be used towards implementation. Everyone still is reserving that money for the purposes of doing the study and implementation.
And the software, the asset management software, originally it had talked about doing a shared asset management software program, but the intention is not to have a shared program, but each municipality will have the same program and hope to get some cost savings in that.
Oh, we're all looking towards using the same program and purchasing as a unit. It's just no longer included in here because we want to work with the other municipalities and know what our real costs are and know how we're going to share perhaps staffing services before we report back to you on those actual numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this, as Councillor Roth and Councillor Palmer have said, this is a step in the right direction. This money, although it said that there was no conditions, it was pretty clear that it was intended to be used for this purpose. And so I think it's good that we're being proactive and not sort of taking it as a carte blanche to do whatever we want with it. And so I think this is a good avenue for sure.
Councillor Spillis?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, like, this is because we all think that the province is going to be cutting our subsidy, and they could be cutting up to $600,000 of our subsidy. And that's a concern because we get that cut and we are nowhere near in completing the study. We could be up to a 12% tax increase, as the mayor pointed out in his letter. So I agree with it. This process is a first step in trying to keep our township sustainable, and I'm really grateful that the CEOs all got together and within a month's time of this funding coming in, they formulate a plan and are moving on it. So I really like that. But I really am concerned without any timely action that we could be looking at very severe tax increases next year, and I don't really want to go there. So I think we're going to have to monitor this over the next few weeks, and if it's not going our way, we may want to do something differently. I just really am concerned about the timing and getting the savings we need in time for this. The 600,000, you can't use that to offset the taxes. You got to go move forward on finding efficiencies. So I support this wholeheartedly, and my sentiments would be to let's get this show on the road as quickly as possible and get some analysis and preliminary results so we know where we stand. And if it's not enough, then we have to figure out what we want to do.
I agree. I think we want to find efficiencies on our terms, and we want to, we don't want to be told by the province. We know what's best for our community, and that's important, so this is good going forward. I'm a little concerned that they've reduced the number too low, that it may not be enough funding initially, but as long as each municipality is putting it aside and saving it, then we can always, support the program at a later date. All right, so any other further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Now we have the planning report and the CIP improvement plan amendment. And we'll maybe invite Jameson down. We may not have any questions. I hope we do. Oh, he sat here all night. Okay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So I'll be quick. The purpose of this report is to seek council's direction to update the R Corridor Community Improvement Plan. The purpose of the amendment is to implement provisions of the County of Wellington's Invest Well Community Improvement Program. So once the amendment is implemented into the township CIP, it will allow for the county to act as a partner financially in community improvement initiatives. So the Invest Well Community Improvement Program was developed by the Economic Development Department of the county. And essentially just is an outline, a path forward for the county's involvement, setting out the specific initiatives and the kind of the eligibility criteria and how we will act as that partner. The amendment process is similar to that of an OPA, or sorry, an official plan amendment. So inclusive of public consultation, in this particular case, consultation with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and a public meeting. So if council so chooses to move forward with this, that's something that we would be looking to get started fairly quickly. And again, just to conclude, that the proposed amendment aligns well with the existing community improvement plan that the township has. It identifies county involvement as a high priority, so this amendment will move forward on that initiative. But with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Roth?
Thank you, Jason. I have no questions.
Councillor Ballmer?
Thanks, well-written report, so no questions, thanks.
Thank you. I have no questions either.
I have no questions, support this wholeheartedly.
Yes.
I have no questions as well. I'm a little bit new to this. Now, this is generated from the community, so they have to come forward and try to have, some improvements in mind and apply, correct?
That's right. So for an eligible owner of property within the community improvement project area that the Puslinch's CIP has identified, they would have to satisfy the township criteria. Then they would become eligible for some of the county incentives.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No problem.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Ballmer, that staff be directed to prepare a draft amendment to the Our Corridor Community Improvement Plan to include provisions from the County of Wellington's Invest Well Community Improvement Program to allow county participation in local community improvement initiatives, and that staff be directed to hold the necessary public meetings at the appropriate times. All in favor? Carried. If Matthew could not sign on the motion, would be perfect. That's why I stumbled. Next one. So, moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that report building 2019-004 with respect to the building department monthly update March 2019 be received for information. Any questions or comments? No? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Ballmer, that report PD 2019-004 regarding the amending site plan agreement with 2120826 Ontario LTD be described as Part Lot 20 Concession 7, being Part 1 on Reference Plan 61R-8086 and Part 2 on Reference Plan 61R-2548 be received, and the council pass a bylaw to authorize entering into an amending site plan agreement with 2120826 Ontario LTD. And Madam CEO would like to.
Yes. Just for council's information, I do have to adjust the amount of the securities to be retained by the township by increasing it by $1,500 just to deal with the monitoring or an equipment device that was supposed to be installed on the well. So we will be holding back an additional $1,500, and that's all I wanted to let you know.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Report. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that report PW 2019-001 regarding the tender results for the 2019 annual road rehabilitation be received, and that the tender for the 2019 annual road rehabilitation be awarded to Capital Paving, Inc. at their tendered amount of $1,182,414 inclusive of the non-refundable portion of HST, and that the excess funds of $51,029 be allocated to emergency work required for culvert of Cooks Mill Race, asset number 2002, and then an additional amount of $8,971 be funded from the Public Works Replacement and Restoration of Aging Infrastructure discretionary reserve for the emergency works required for culvert of Cooks Mill Race, asset number 2002, and the council authorizes the mayor and the clerk to sign the required contract documents. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. All right. What's next? Committee minutes. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that council receives the following committee minutes. March 12th, 2019, Planning and Development Advisory Committee. B, March 12th, 2019, Committee of Adjustment. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. What we got here? Now, bylaws. You have one? Oh, municipal track here. Is this the Don? All right, so we have the presentation of Don Creed, the Director of Public Works. His plaque. Get me in the spotlight. Don, I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, but I'd like to present you with a certificate in recognition of your distinguished career in public works. And you truly will be missed, and I really appreciate the professionalism that you provided me myself as a constituent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Want a picture?
All right.
You both have to pretend you're enjoying this.
Oh, I love it.
Well, actually,
Don't get me in
In front of me.
part of that makes me want to just focus on her, but
You'll be in the background of the picture hiding under the table.
thank you.
Don't want to break the camera.
Beauty.
I do have a couple words here, so. First off, a little unfinished business from lunch this morning. Ms. Landry gave a very heartfelt speech this afternoon, and I can't recall if I actually give her a true thank you for that, so.
Yes, you did. You came and saw me.
Okay. I wasn't sure, I couldn't recall on that, so. I'd like to thank both present and past council members for your trust and the support you've shown me over the last 8 years. While we may not have always seen eye to eye, we always shown respect for one another. I will be leaving proud of my accomplishments in my respective departments, but equally as proud to have been part of this team and the accomplishments we have achieved together to move the township in a forward direction. Many challenges and tough decisions lay ahead for you. Stay the course, continue to work together, and you will be successful. I would also like to thank all current and past staff for their support and friendship. It's been a great 8 years. Just before I came down to council tonight, I got a call that my home in Guelph has been officially sold, so there is no turning back. As this is my last council meeting, I wish you and your families all the best and good luck. Thank you. Just wanted to say that.
One other thing for you,
There's
Don.
one other thing, just so you know there.
This a card here from the township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John? Nope, sorry. Almost.
Okay, well, I'll see you.
Are we allowed to say something?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let them-
Don, I just have a couple things I'd like to say.
Can't get out easy, eh?
I have mixed emotions. I'm really sorry to see you leave because of the great job you did. And I'm happy to see you leave to enter this chapter of your life. And having talked to you, and now that your house is sold, I know you're moving on to a new home and lots of travel. I wish you all the best. The only fear I have is that you'll miss your thousands of critics. And The only advice I'll give is don't run for politics. You enjoy your retirement and all the best.
I will, thank you very much.
Councilor Donlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you, I remember the first time we met. I don't know if you remember the first time we met. I was acting in my capacity as a community volunteer with the Aberfoyle Farmers Market, and you and I were tasked with the job of trying to figure out where we could put that sign, that seasonal sign. And, you know, in that role, I was dependent on your experience and knowledge and how to help me solve one little problem for one specific community group. But a few years later, when I rejoined council, you know, I then leaned on you for that same kind of insight on how to solve problems and educate myself onto how to deal with problems that affected many more than just one community group, residents from across the township and groups, user groups, individual users. And through all of that, I think what I came to respect the most was that your ability to fulfill your role as department head, the director of public works, but at the same time, keep your boots firmly planted on the ground. That meant that I knew I was going to get reasonable, thoughtful, and practical information back from you, stuff that I could actually use. And that's made a huge difference, I think, not just to me, but to our residents as a whole when they have questions, that they know they're going to get that respectful but practical, boots on the ground information. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Oh, there you are. You should put a bell on you.
Hey, Councilor Goyda?
Yes, I just wanted to say, Don, first of all, congratulations on your retirement. I myself haven't had the opportunity of working with you all that long, but in the short while that I have, you have been tremendously welcoming, very insightful, very candid, always willing to share your information, and I want you to know that I personally really value that. From the time that you took me on a roads tour and showed me, you know, all the roads, all the ponds, all the parks, the Orc, that may not have seemed like a really big thing for you, but for me, that helped me a huge amount. And there's been other times I've come in and asked questions, and instead of just telling me, you say, well, come in the truck, I'll show you. And I know that doesn't happen in every other municipality. So I really, I'm very gracious to you for teaching me and showing me and just talking to me. I know that will serve me well in my entire time here at council. So I really thank you for that, and I wish you all the best in this next chapter.
Thank you. And you have a few days left. You need to go for a ride.
First met you just over 2.5 years ago when I came on council, and came to see you and talk about the roads type of thing, and we went on a tour, and you had everything down pat. You knew your stuff, and I was impressed that you were trying to get everything done as efficiently as and cost effectively as possible. You're part of a dying breed, Don. I don't know if you know that, but you are, in the sense that, you know, you're one of the few people that's worked up their way from the bottom, learning as it went up. And as the saying goes, cream rises to the top. And I really feel about that. And we're grateful for the time you spent here and imparted your wisdom. So I wish you all the best in your retirement, Don.
Thank you.
And I as well. I wish you a very long and healthy, as well as your wife, retirement. Enjoy it. And I'm open for a road tour in the next few days as well, if that's an option.
I still have some space on my calendar.
And
Limited, but
Pencil you in.
I look forward to something that you will experience that I experienced. I didn't do anywhere near 30 years in public works. I did 6. And I know you and your staff live by the Weather Channel. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to watch it anymore. And the first time that it snowed and I had no idea it was coming was amazing, because you've dedicated your life for 6-7 months of the year to these L's that come across the screen, and you no longer have to do that. And I hope you enjoy it. It'll be wonderful.
thank you very much.
All right. Here. All right, so
Get all the potholes on the country roads fixed before you leave.
moved by
I got
Counselor.
enough time for that.
I got a municipal announcement too, maybe we'll
Okay.
go around the table.
Okay, so where were we? What did?
Municipal announcements.
Okay, municipal announcements. Counselor Roth,
I have nothing.
Counselor Ballmer,
I don't think I have anything, thank you.
Counselor Guida.
Nope.
Counselor Spence.
Yeah, I have something, Green Legacy Tree Day. Trees come in on Thursday,
Thursday?
not tomorrow, but a week tomorrow, 2 o'clock. So any help that I can get to offload, appreciate it.
I'll be there.
Great, thank you. And I'll be talking to Don about setting up the tables after the tree delivery. And Saturday morning, it starts at 8:30, but I suggest we get there at 7:30 to do any minor adjustments we think we have to do. And if we get it all done before 8:30, we'll open up the doors before 8:30, simple as that. And that's all I got. Oh yeah, just one last thing. If you got garbage bags you want to get rid of, bring them to there. People use them to put their trees in, so don't forget about that. These are your little shopping bags I'm talking
Yeah.
about, not the big greenies.
Would food basic bags be sufficient, or?
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. Yeah, food basic bags.
Grocery bags.
Yeah, grocery bags, Fortinos, wherever you shop, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to support one. Any other comments? No, okay. Moved by Counselor Ballmer, seconded by Counselor Roth. The following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. A bylaw being a bylaw to provide for the appointment of a municipal law enforcement officer, Blair Lance, for the Corporation of the Township of Pushlands, and to repeal bylaw number 054-2017. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Now we're going to go to close. Yeah, so unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but we need to go back into closed session just to finish up with an item earlier in the agenda. Moved by Councillor Sepulveda, seconded by Councillor Goida, that council shall go into closed session under section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO clerk, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to Swastika Trail judicial review. All in favor?